Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Ask Dr. Renee show. I am your host, Dr. Renee, and this is Mother's Day, which is celebrated here in the United States today. And actually, I lived in a couple other countries, and it's not Mother's Day in every country today. They have different days. But today, it is Mother's Day. And to conclude our Mother's Day week, we have, as one of my friends said, the mother of all mothers, my mother, Reverend Joyce Matthews. If you have not watched our show before, our show is here to motivate and inspire you to live the life you deserve. And I think her story is so motivating, inspiring, because I think it probably is what motivates and inspires me to be the best person I can be. So if you have missed any episodes, please go to our YouTube channel, Ask Dr. Renee, the website, askdrrenee.info. All that information will be in the box below. And if you have questions tonight, there is a box in YouTube that says Be a Participant. Click on that. Then you'll click on the white boxes in the upper right-hand corner. It'll say Q&A, and you can do this at any time. Click on there, and it'll say Ask a Question. You can type in your questions at any time, and at that time, I will, at the time that I start doing Q&A, we'll answer the questions. So thank you so much for everyone tuning in this evening. Thank you, Mommy. Welcome to the show. So let's get started. So, Mom, can you please tell us about your fabulous childhood in Detroit?
Well, I am one of 7 children, and I was number 3. And we actually moved to Detroit from Ferndale when I was 5 years old. And I attended Higginbotham Elementary School and then Mumford High School. And then I worked for a while. I graduated from high school at 16 and worked for a while, a year or so. And then I started Highland Park Community College. And then from there, I went to work on the job training, respiratory therapy at Henry Ford Hospital. And that's when I learned that Highland Park was planning to open a respiratory therapy program. So I called Highland Park and I signed up for the program. And by me completing 2 years already, I had completed all of my liberal arts classes and just had to take the respiratory therapy and a few science classes. And so by this time, I was paying for my own tuition because with 7 children 2 years apart, when I finished Highland Park the first time, there was another sister ready to start college. And I felt I needed to get out of the way so that my parents could pay for her tuition. Well, after I started respiratory therapy, which was an additional 2 years, but it was part-time, I began working at Henry Ford Hospital in respiratory therapy. And I worked there and finished the program and continued working in respiratory therapy in several hospitals in the city. But one of the exciting things, when I was a student in respiratory therapy, I won a scientific research project contest. And it was about cardiac arrest patients at Henry Ford Hospital. And so I reviewed hundreds and hundreds of charts and drew some conclusions about how effective the CPR was. And then I submitted that paper to the American Association for Respiratory Therapy, and I won. And so I had the opportunity to present my paper at their national seminar with thousands of people. And so that was pretty exciting.
Wow, congratulations. So Mom, how did you decide that you wanted to go into respiratory and not be a doctor? Because I really feel that you would have been a much better doctor than I ever can be.
Well, I knew that my parents did not have the money to send me to college for all those years, and that I needed to work. And so I didn't know what I wanted to be, actually. My mom wanted me to be an elementary school teacher, and that wasn't coming out too interesting to me. And so my aunt, Naomi Donahue, worked at the Michigan Employment Security Commission. And so I visited her, and she saw that I was tested to determine what my strengths were. And we discovered it was science. And so they talked to me about the careers that were available with science background. And it turned out that inhalation therapy was the name of it. And that was interesting to me. And so I went to Henry Ford Hospital, where the program was, where they would give me on-the-job training. And I started at a very weird time because it was during the 1967 riots.
Oh, wow.
And so my dad would drive me to work in the morning, and then I would have to work 2 or 3 shifts, and he'd come and pick me up whenever it was time for me to come home, because there were no buses, there was nothing. It was, the hospital was a site for all of the military men, and so we would eat lunch with them in the parking garages and so forth. It was quite a time, and the patients that were coming in, you felt like you were working during a war.
Sure. Interesting. Very interesting. See, I'm learning things I didn't even know. So you taught at Highland Park Community College.
Oh yeah, well, I taught after I became a respiratory therapist.
Right.
Passed my oral exams and my written exams. And I was working at Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital. I actually was director of a technician program, respiratory therapy technician program. It was a 1-year technician program, and the students could take their certification exam upon completion. And so the program was an excellent program. And we actually had college faculty coming in from several different colleges to teach some of the classes. The program was designed for ADC mothers to give them an opportunity to work and to make enough money that they could live off of it. And so the dean from Highland Park Community College came over to visit with me, and he saw what I was doing, and he offered me a job at the college that I had just graduated from. So I did take the job. So now I was working at a community college with 2 associate degrees. And so I felt like a second-class citizen. And out of the blue, University of Michigan offered teachers an opportunity to get their degree if they were working in a vocation education program. And so I was selected to participate in that program. And they told me if I completed the summer institute or the summer program, then I would possibly be eligible to continue and to get my bachelor's degree in probably a year's time. And so that's exactly what I did. But the funny thing about that is the 5-week summer class or summer program was interrupted because I was engaged to be married. And I explained to my then fiance that I could not go on a honeymoon because I was a student at U of M. And he didn't pay much attention to that. And so he got airline tickets for us to go to Antigua on our honeymoon.
Some things haven't changed.
What?
Some things haven't changed.
So I didn't know how to explain to my professor that I needed a week off to go on a honeymoon. So I waited till the program got started, and I knew it was too late for him to recruit someone to take my place. And then I explained to him that I needed a week off and that I would make up all the work that I missed during that week, which I did. And so I came back. I actually was ahead of the students, and I graduated with honors in a year's time. And then after that, I was at home in bed with morning sickness, and this was a year after I graduated, and I received a phone call from U of M asking me if I was interested in receiving a scholarship and stipend to get my master's degree. And I said, of course. And so I started back in school, and I was very pregnant by the end of it. And they didn't know I was pregnant until I began to show. And so Renee was born the day after I graduated.
Oh, how lovely. So for all
By the
my
way,
fellow
I
Spartans, apparently I did somehow walk across the stage for U of M. Isn't that crazy? Okay.
By the way, I did work full-time during my entire pregnancy and during that bachelor's degree program as well.
So you have a bachelor's degree in education, right?
Yes.
And then a master's of science, right?
Master's in higher education.
Higher education, yes. Okay. So when you decided to get your master's, what were you thinking you were going to do for a living after that? Because I'm sure you didn't think you were going to go back to the community college, right?
When I got my master's?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that was to make me a better teacher at the community college. By the way, when I started working at Highland Park, the program was on probation, and I had like 6 to 9 months to get it off of probation. And when the folks came to check the program out the second time, the first time I was not even employed there, they said that I had raised the program's level so high, it was from the basement to the roof, and that the college should give me a big raise.
Oh, wonderful. I'm not surprised though.
It was one of the best programs in the state.
Lovely. So now you have me. So then when did my lovely sister come along?
Oh, 2.5 years later.
And where were you working at the time?
I was still at Highland Park Community College.
Okay. So my whole growing up, my mother worked in the hospitals. So when did you begin working in the hospitals?
In 1967 at Henry Ford Hospital during the riots.
When did you start working for running the respiratory programs?
In the hospital? When did I become a director of the respiratory program?
Exactly.
Oh, when I left Highland Park Community College, and that was probably 1981. And I went to Detroit Receiving Hospital. I had decided that I had been teaching longer than I had actually worked in the field, taking care of patients. And so I felt like I needed to get back into the hospital. And I knew I'd get a lot of experience at Detroit Receiving. And so I went there to be the assistant director of respiratory therapy. And I was assistant director for 1 year. And the director, Valerie Dudley, moved on to UCLA Medical Center. And so I moved into her position as director of respiratory therapy.
So, my mother does not do respiratory anymore. So we'll talk about that a little later. So can you please inform my lovely audience what it was like raising the wonderful me?
Renee was always a challenge. Renee suffered from asthma, and so that alone was a challenge. When she was just a tiny tot, an infant, she was always throwing up, and that was when she started. I only breastfed for 8 weeks because I went back to work, and so when she started that formula, she was sick every morning, and we didn't know what was going on, and discovered that she had allergies and she was allergic to that formula. And so the doctor had me change her formula or milk several times. And we discovered everything we changed to, she was allergic to that as well. And then finally, when she got a little bigger, probably, or a little older, she was about 2, I guess, when they could take, draw blood and do the allergy test on the blood. It was called a RAS test.
2 months.
And 2 months?
No, it was 2 months, right? I wasn't 2 years old, was I?
Well, I think you were older than 2 months.
Okay.
And so we discovered they could only test for a few things because it's just a small quantity of blood. And so we knew a few things that she was allergic to. And then later when she got older, probably about 5, then we were able to do the skin test on her back. And then they determined that she was allergic to a lot of things. And so even when she was in nursery school, they had a chart of all the things she was allergic to. And that brings about another story when Renee almost died. She was in nursery school a half a day, 3 days a week, because she was just so busy around the house, I could not take care of Alicia. I was wondering why I was finding Alicia on the floor, and she was just an infant. And I couldn't imagine my husband putting her on the floor. And so one day I was in the kitchen cooking, and I turned to the family room, and there was little short Renee holding Alicia's head with Alicia's feet dangling. And she was walking across the family room with her like she was a doll. And I couldn't say anything because I thought she'd break her neck if I said anything and startled her. So I just had to stand there and watch. And then after that, I explained to her that she could not take Alicia out of the bassinet. She could not, out of her cradle, she could not handle the baby alone. And I talked to my husband and I said, I think it's time for Renee to start school. She needs to go to nursery school because Alicia and I need a break.
Whatever.
And so at the nursery school, she wasn't there, I don't think, 6 months before they didn't administer the medication at the proper time. And so when Renee came home from school that day, she just was so full of energy and she was running around the house and I couldn't calm her down and she just kept running and I couldn't calm her down. So I told my husband, I said, let's take her for a drive. We're going to leave Alicia in the crib and just take her for a ride. And because that always calmed her down. And while we were in the driveway, Renee stopped breathing. My husband came out to the car and I said, get Alicia. Renee is not breathing. And I was doing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And we dropped Alicia off across the street and took her to the hospital, Renee to the hospital, where we were there all night. And they were, working on her diligently, trying to get her to breathe again. And when they finally got her breathing again, we were able to take her home that next day. And her pediatrician said that she had an overdose of her medicine. And so that is what happened the nursery school gave it to her late, and I gave it to her on time. And so that was the reaction. So Renee has been a difficult child. Every month we were at the hospital. Henry Ford, West Bloomfield, nurses and doctors knew us by name as soon as we walked in, because Renee was having severe asthma attacks every month. And in the spring, in April, and in October, we'd have to get in an ambulance and go from Henry Ford to a hospital that had overnight beds. So we had an exciting life with Renee. The whole family would go to the hospital every month.
Every night?
Every month.
Well, no, but every night, April and October.
Well, in April and October, we would take turns, Dad and myself, staying with you until you were old enough and smart enough to know what you were allergic to. And then I could give you a pad of paper and you could write down what respiratory therapists came in and if they gave you your treatment properly and so forth.
Yes. And I was very keen. I knew exactly what was supposed to happen, what wasn't supposed to happen. And so if any nurse mistreated me in any way, shape, or form, I would tell my mother the very next day, she came in here and she was not right. And this is what she did. And she never needs to come back. So I've always been big on customer service. That's the way I've always been. But then I went to, I had perfect attendance in school, which people can never believe, but that's because even though I would get out of the hospital at what time in the morning?
You'd get out at any time, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd say,
go to school the very next day.
I'd say to my husband, so which one of us is staying home today? And Renee said, and so Renee said, well, I'm going to school. So I said, well, I guess we shouldn't stay home, even though we've been up all night.
So I was such a good student. I had perfect attendance for all 4 years of high school, which I'm sure many high schoolers cannot say that. I didn't skip. I went to school every single day. My sister got the exact same award when she graduated high school too. All 4 years, perfect attendance. As a matter of fact, one day in high school, I went to school and I probably shouldn't have gone, right, Mom?
Oh, yes. And then you called, in fact, your girlfriend, Salam Sanders, called me and said, Renee's sick and she wants you to bring her nebulizer to school. So I brought the nebulizer to school. We went in the office and I set it up and when I gave her treatment and it didn't help much. We measured her breathing with the peak flow meter. And so I called the doctor and she said, bring her in. No, she said, take her to the hospital emergency room. I took her to the hospital emergency room. They gave her the, what was the medicine that they gave you with the injection?
Salumedrol?
No.
Which one?
In any case, they gave her a shot.
Epinephrine?
Epinephrine. Yes. They gave you a shot and you got better and you said, okay, now you can take me back to school.
You would have thought I loved high school. Not necessarily. So that brings me to another point. So Mom, we've had such wonderful challenges with school. As much as I loved going to school as a child, we've had such wonderful, interesting experiences. Can you please tell them about the time I came home and this young man had called me a name and I was really enamored because I thought he liked me when I was 5?
No, that wasn't school. I don't remember that.
School. Oh, I could even tell you his name, but we're not going to put him out on blast like that. So one day I came home and I told my mom the little boy at school called me the N-word. And she was like, what? And her reaction wasn't the reaction I was looking for because I honestly did think that this little boy liked me. So that's why I thought this N-word was a term of endearment. My mother said, oh, I'm going to the school tomorrow. And I still was confused, like, why is she going to the school? What did I say wrong?
No, that happened at the playground.
No, the playground
The
at school. Mom, I
babysitter.
know. I remember. No, the school. That was. I know exactly who it was. It was the little boy at school.
Okay.
Yes. So my mother had to go and talk to the school and let me. And then she let me know. I didn't know that was a problem. But then later on, we had the incident at the playground. The playground was across the street from our house. We used to run across the street to the playground, me and my sister, all the time. No big deal. We just had to come home when, it got dark outside. And we were at the playground, and this high schooler was calling us the N-word. And then he hit my finger. I was climbing up the slide, and the slide was probably like a 6-foot slide, right, Mom?
Yes.
And he had a metal bar, and he hit my fingers with this metal bar. And of course, it hurt. I let go, and I fell from the top of the slide down to the ground. And it was, a bunch of wood chips down there. And I get up, and my sister, who is younger than me, looks in my mouth and says, Renee, you're bleeding, and blood is just coming out of my mouth. And now we have to go back home. And so what happened when we got home, Mom?
I put you in the car, and we went and found the boy's house and went and talked to his mom.
So we had some interesting times. But then there was, in high school, I had a teacher, God rest her soul. She accused me and my very dear friend of cheating, which was just the wrong thing to do. One, I wasn't a cheater. And two, I think she thought that we would be like every other student, just take it laying down, and we didn't. So me and my friend had actually made arrangements to meet with her at lunchtime and talk to her about the situation that we have. And and she blew us off. And we're like, okay. So then we had to escalate it to tell our parents, and they had to get involved. And it ended up being that she gave us bad grades, and we ended up having to go against the entire school board. And we won. And so we were so excited we won, but she had a certain amount of days to appeal. And my mother, it was about to be spring break. So she purposely didn't tell me that the lady had requested the appeal until after spring break, because I was so happy and it was over. So then she told me, and remember the day we went for the second hearing, I was in the back seat of the car and I couldn't walk. I was like, Mom, I can't walk. She's like, what do you mean? I go, my legs, they don't seem to be working. And I knew I think I was just done. I was so tired of this foolishness, because at that point we hadn't went against the whole school board. Now this was against the whole school board.
No, this was the first one was a small grade change review committee.
Yeah. So this was the entire school board.
Board.
So we ended up winning. So God is good. So what would you say is the most challenging part of motherhood?
Taking care of Renee.
I already got a message from Salam and said, she called you a difficult child. Okay.
Difficult in that, in the breathing, of course. But I also remember one night Renee came home and she said something had happened to her foot.
Oh, God.
And she woke us up to tell us. She was driving age by this time. And so she didn't come to me, the person in healthcare. She went to her dad.
I always did.
You have to look at my foot. And I thought, what is she talking about? So the next morning, I got up and I went to Renee's room. And I said, Renee, where were you last night? And she could not tell a lie. She told me she was going to a movie in Farmington Hills, and she, of course, did not go to the movie. She went to Detroit, and while there, she slipped on some ice and hurt her foot.
In the driveway of her sister's house. So I broke my foot. I broke my toe, but it never did. I never did. I did go to the hospital though, right? But I went later, right?
Oh yes, you told me you were okay. And so that I went to work that day. You went to school. I came home from work. It was the day that we had several inches of snow, and I wondered where you and Alicia were. And I'm pacing the floor, wondering where my daughters are. And I get a call from the Henry Ford Hospital saying, your daughter Renee is here and she needs permission for treatment. Renee was full of excitement.
I'm independent.
So, no, you weren't difficult in that you were a bad child or a delinquent.
Thank you.
But Renee always liked to walk along the edge. She took risk.
But at the end of this story, I ended up having my foot never healed properly. And so anyone that knows me knows I did have to have surgery a couple of years ago. And that was because of this accident at 16 years old. And crazy enough, the reason why I had to have the surgery is because I couldn't wear anything but gym shoes. And that's how bad my foot had gotten. And I had seen x-rays and I knew my toe wasn't right. And so I'm very grateful to Hyde Park Foot and Ankle, Dr. Gina Sims, for getting me straight so that I can wear my 5 and 6 inch heels with no problem now. So, but so Mom, so we went through, and she was, like I said, she was always the director of respiratory department. And then she had another job that was also in healthcare. And then we were in college, I think, and she decided to be a deacon at the church. And then in the midst of that, she decides to become a priest. So what made you make that huge career move?
Well, I actually was I had been preaching at All Saints Episcopal Church. Our bishop had called a retreat for all clergy for the weekend, for Saturday and Sunday, Bishop Woods. And so he asked the priest to select a layperson to preach that Sunday that he would be absent. And I was selected. Our priest was fairly new, and so I didn't want to disappoint him with everybody turning him down. So I said, okay, yes, I'll preach. And he said that Bishop Woods would send the sermon to all the clergy. And I could use that sermon. And I told him I didn't know if I could preach someone else's sermon. And so he said, well, read it and then let me know. So I read it and I told him I think I needed to write my own. And he said, fine, but just send it to me to proofread it. And so I did. I faxed it to him. And he called me up and said, wow. I said, well, it's okay to make criticism, to critique it. And he said, no, it's perfect. It's good. And the congregation enjoyed the sermon. And so from that point forward, I was preaching about 4 times a year. And I was working in respiratory therapy. And so I decided that I would answer an ad for the Whitaker, I think it was called Whitaker Institute.
Oh.
And it's the diocese school. And so I did, and I interviewed with the dean of the program and told her that I wanted to take some Bible study classes because I was doing a little preaching at the church. And she recommended that I take the year of discernment. That program was from September to June. And at the end of the program, I had discerned that I was called to ordain ministry. And so, of course, I thought it was to become a deacon, and that I continued to work in respiratory therapy. And then as my interviews for the deacon program pursued, I first met with a small group of people from my church who interviewed me and said I needed to step out of the box and take more risk and become a priest. And I thought, they don't even know what they're talking about. And so I just went on to the next step, which was the Commission on Ministry. And that interview was 3 different rooms, a room full of clergy, a room of lay people, and a room of teachers of all sorts. And they unanimously felt I was called to the priesthood. So the next step was to go and to meet with Bishop Gibbs to hear the results of my interviews. And he was excited to tell me that they felt I was called to the priesthood. And he said, so what do you think? I said, I think I need to pray some more because I need to hear the call for myself. And so it took me another whole year. And as I continued the deacon program, and then I did, after speaking with a priest who interviewed me in that room full of priests, and we chatted about how did they come to that conclusion, and she said, "Are you afraid?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "This is a major step." And she said, "We were all afraid." And I said, "Oh." And so with that in mind, I went home to tell my husband, your dad, that I think I'm called to be a priest.
So, so when you made that decision, so you went to school, you were still at the Whitaker School in Detroit at that time, right?
Yes.
And then becoming a priest required you to be a year in Chicago. So
No, when I started seminary, I applied to Ecumenical Theological Seminary in Detroit.
Oh, that's right.
And at the same time, I had to apply to Seabury Western in Evanston, Illinois. And I had to be accepted by both seminaries in order to become an ordained priest in the Episcopal Church. And so I took 1 year and 2 quarters at Ecumenical Theological Seminary, and then I did 1 year and 1 quarter at Seabury Western.
So, so my mother actually lived in Evanston in the dormitories for 1 year and went home every month because at the time Southwest had these cheap tickets or something. So what was that year like as far as motherhood, being a wife, etc.?
It was a busy time. It took, it takes a village to raise a child. It took our whole family, my 2 daughters and me, to make, and my husband, to just reach out to each other and to support each other throughout this time. The girls would come home to visit Dad at staggered times. So when they came home, I wasn't here, and only one would be here at a time, so that he had a constant rotation of daughters and wife. And they began watching Amazing Race together on Sundays on a conference call. And see, all of those things helped while I was at Seabury studying.
Yes, we watch Amazing Race, Biggest Loser, and Hell's Kitchen. Those are our 3 shows that we watch as a family on conference call.
Our first Easter, I couldn't convince Alicia to come to Seabury, come to Evanston, and I had to stay on campus. And so I called your dad and told him to stay home because Alicia was coming. And I hopped in my car and went to Renee's apartment. And so we had Easter together. And what did you tell me?
I don't remember. What did I tell you?
You felt like you were in a divorced family and the wife had custody of Renee and the husband had custody of Alicia. And so by the next time Easter rolled around, everybody came to Evanston, Illinois.
We went to, because we went to your church. We went to my, you didn't go, but my dad and Alicia went to my church. Then we went to the church you were working at, and we ate dinner at Lowry's that year in Chicago, downtown Chicago.
Right.
But yeah, it was fun though, because my mom was actually here. So although she didn't drive down to Chicago often, I had to drive up there to go get her. But we would go, sometimes we go shopping downtown, sometimes we go out to eat. So it was cool when she was here for that one year. That was cool.
And so what were you doing in Chicago?
I was finishing medical school.
Yeah, so we were both students.
We were both students, yes. Although I was trying to convince her to be my roommate so then my dad would pay half my rent, but it didn't work out that way.
Well, it was very interesting to have my daughter to help me move into my dorm.
Yes.
In Evanston. Yes. That was quite a switch.
The weekend she moved into that dorm was her very first day of class is the first time that I met Oprah Winfrey. I got tickets to the show and I said, "Mom, you're going to be here, so we'll all go to the show." And we called my sister and she couldn't get away from work. So one of my girlfriends drove from Detroit, and we went to the show. And that was my mother's first day of class. And all she could think about was, well, I have to go to class. I said, "Mom, we have the hottest ticket in town. What are you talking about, class?" But she was able to go to class after we left the taping of the show, because we went to the first show of the day. So we were there at like 5 a.m. and we got out before noon, I think. And then my dad drove her to school for her to have class. And so for her to attend class. And that was a funny day because we woke up so early, it was all a blur. I didn't really believe it happened. So when my dad came back after dropping her off, I was asleep on the couch. He came in, I woke up, he was sitting here. And I said, "Dad, I had the oddest dream. I met Oprah Winfrey." He said, "You did?" I said, "No, I didn't." And my father does not argue with me. I was like, "Daddy, you could argue with me. You can tell me I'm wrong." He's like, "No, Renee, but you're right." I said, "Really?" And so that Easter that me and my mother were together was the weekend that it aired. It aired that Good Friday. And so unfortunately, me and my mother both were at work, between me at the hospital with med school and she was in class. Neither one of us could watch it. So we both missed it. And I didn't have, I think I didn't have a VCR or something. And so we couldn't tape it. So somebody ended up taping it for us and we were able to finally see it. And, the rest is history. But yeah, that was the weekend. And my sister called because she saw it with my dad. She saw it air and she was like, "Renee, she showed it. I saw the whole thing." I was like, "What, really?" And so, and it was on Oxygen. And Oxygen was not on my cable. That's why I couldn't see it. So yeah, that was the first. And so my parents were both in the audience the first time I met Oprah, which meant a lot to me because they knew how much that meant to me. And my dad said when I got back to my chair, "You did it." I go, "I did, didn't I?" But I'm telling you, when I woke up from that nap, I still didn't believe it really happened, but it did. So, so as far as motherhood and me living my life on the edge, as you say. So just for instance, I just started carrying my Epipen, 2 years ago? 3? But please don't listen to me. Everybody carry your Epipen.
Do they know what an Epipen is?
Oh, Epipen is for people who have allergies like myself that are very violent allergies. Because if I have just the smallest amount of something, my throat will start closing and I will have respiratory problems. So Epipen is an auto injector and it automatically injects the correct amount of epinephrine into you stab it into your thigh, which by the grace of God, I've never had to use the thing. Although, let me rephrase that. There was a couple times I probably should have used it, but I refused to use it. But I'm still here. So clearly I made the right decisions. But so like I said, since I've liked to live my life a bit on the edge, what did you think when I decided that I wanted to go to medical school? Well, first of all, I always wanted to be a doctor, but my mother said I should major in chemical engineering. So
No, I
that
didn't.
you said engineering.
No, I didn't. I just
What
said
did
you should major in something that you can be employed in after 4 years in case something happens and you don't go to medical school, you can
Okay.
still get a job.
Yes. So somehow that ended up being engineering. And I changed my major halfway through school from engineering to physiology. So what did you think about when I changed my major?
I
Because
thought it was fun.
physiology is not quite the job. Oh, okay. Well, physiology, we both knew I was going to have to go to grad school in order to get a job in that too.
Yes.
So, so then I decided to go to medical school overseas. So what did you, I mean, although you had kind of suggested it because the hospital you were working at, you saw a lot of these students.
Yes. I used to teach the students who are in medical school in St. Martin and also in England. And I just gave her those as some options. And I talked to the physicians at the hospital about those programs, the physicians who were in charge of those students, and learned that the chief of cardiology at Providence was graduated from the school in St. Martin.
Yeah. So, so basically I did have my mother's blessing when I left the country.
I was a little concerned about her asthma, but figured that in a medical school, there are plenty of doctors.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the weather on the island really wasn't that bad. It was just the whole food situation because, of course, on the island, they're not quite as familiar with the whole allergy thing like we are in the U.S., so they don't know necessarily that you cannot cook chicken and fish in the same grease. And so, and because she knows her daughter who asks no questions and eats first and then realizes that there's a problem, I'm sure she, just was a little nervous.
Well, let's say when you went to England, I got my passport. So I would be ready to fly in for an emergency.
So what would you say has been the most challenging time for you professionally or as a mother? What would you say, or maybe both?
Probably the most challenging time was taking the oral exams for respiratory therapy and even taking the written exam and waiting for the results. And then going before the oral examiners. There were 2 different rooms of exams. The exam was in Colorado Springs. That oral exam could be anywhere in the country. And so it was quite expensive to take, and I couldn't afford to not pass. As it turned out, I passed with flying colors, and they asked me to be an oral examiner after that. And so I gave exams all over the country for several years.
Excellent. So, so what was a challenging time as a mother, or have you not experienced it yet? Because we've been such wonderful children.
Oh dear. Probably when you called me to come to St. Martin and bring you home because you couldn't take it another minute.
But you know what? I didn't tell you to come. I just called. My sister was like, "Oh Lord, Alicia." She said, "Well, and then you talked to Alicia, and then that's when you came because I didn't tell you to come because I knew I was like, oh my God, my mother can't come, and I'm in the middle of this water." And I knew it was going to be like a $1,300 or some ridiculous amount of, ticket for you to just show up. So I did not ask you because and at the same time, that was the same time that you were not working because you were about to go to the seminary. So I was like, I can't tell this woman to come. So I was like, well, I'm just going to have to figure this out on my own. And next thing you know, she called me and said, I'll be there. I was like, what? And then I went to the airport and picked up my mom. I was like, oh, I said, she saves the day again. Thank you, Mommy. My sister was in college at the time. So she's like, there's nothing she could do. So thankfully, my mother always saves the day. Always saves the day. And then she has the craziest suggestions that I think are so crazy. So when I moved to England, she says, Renee, why don't you try life without a television? Renee Matthews, no TV? I said, oh my God, this woman must be crazy. Well, guess who lived in England an entire year without the television? So, and actually, I think it was the best thing ever because I never read so much in my life. Between medical books and my leisure reading, I was a reading nut. I was killing the books. I joined a book club. And I mean, shoot, I couldn't imagine joining a book club now. I'm so crazy busy. But I was in a book club and I was doing so well in school. I was like, oh, this is wonderful. I was traveling. I really didn't realize I missed a whole year of television until I came back home. And I would hear stuff and be like, I didn't see that episode. I don't know what they're talking about. But that's because I didn't have TV for a year. But and then I didn't have internet either. I had a room with a view. That was it. I had no internet, no TV. The internet was at the library. So clearly once you left the library and it was closed and no more internet, and back to my room I went. And I don't think I really had a plethora of DVDs to play on my computer either. So yeah, it was a lot of reading. But it was good. I had a great time there. Great time. So what is the lesson that you think it took you the longest to learn?
What is the lesson that took
you the longest to learn?
Well, I don't think it took me that long, but I did learn by the time I started college that no one could read my mind. So if I was having a problem, that I needed to speak up about it. I need to tell the teacher, this is the problem, or my parents, this is the problem that I'm having. That I just needed to speak my mind.
Yes, my mother is the nicest person on the planet. And I'm just like, Mom, you don't have to be so nice to everybody. But, you know, I can see that would be something because, like I said, you're so nice. I'm like, Mom, you need to say something. That's not right. So just say something and immediately things can change. We have a question from Teresa. Is your mom the reason you were inspired to pursue medical school? And what kind of mother was she as she balanced career and family? And for my mom, how did you juggle it all? So my mother inspired me to go to medical school because of the fact that I grew up in the hospital because she used to take us to work with her a lot. So we would be on the respiratory, in the respiratory department all the time. Then because I spent so much time in the hospitals, I knew the hierarchy of things, and I don't take direction well. So therefore I knew I couldn't be a nurse. So I figured I had to be a doctor. And I knew, the way things worked at the hospital. And I said, that's the position that I would prefer to be in. So that's how I ended up in medical school. My mother was great at balancing career and family. Honestly, my mother didn't miss a dance recital. She didn't miss a piano recital. She did not miss a piano competition, dance competition. Now, dance competition, some of them we did go on with the dance group ourselves, but I think that gave us the independence that we have now because she would, here's your money to spend, and we would ride with whomever and we would go. And my mom is not a stage mom and never has been. She was not, on the side of the stage primping me and all that and stuff. She knew I knew what I was supposed to do, and I went out and did it. So, because what many people don't know is I'm a triple threat. I danced, I sang, and I acted, and I competed basically in all three. So my mother, she would run lines with me. She knew most of my forensic pieces by heart, just like I did, because she would help me practice. She just like I listen to sermons now, she listened to all my pieces. She required us to practice the piano a certain amount of time every day. And so we had a timer. She'd make us sit there. My singing, she would always, she's the one that took me to my singing lessons. My cousin was my voice teacher. So I think she balanced it well. Like, I never noticed that. I mean, I knew she worked, and it was funny because when my mother worked from home, we were miserable. Do you remember that, Mom?
Yes.
We were so mad because she was like, shh, shh, I'm trying to work. And we were like, okay, but we're on vacation this week. So this is our house, and we're supposed to have the run of the house to do what we want to do because we don't have school this week.
No, you have to do your chores.
And she's like, be quiet, be quiet. And we're like, what? And I mean, because when she wasn't there, we just did whatever. We did our chores, but we weren't loud, and, we had the TVs on and the music playing, but she was, trying to do business calls. So we were like, oh my God, you've got to get out of this house. You got to find you an office somewhere outside of this house because you're making us crazy. But yeah, so my mom, she juggled it very well.
I'm organized.
Yes, she's very organized. My mother, she always made sure, she made sure somebody was supposed to pick us up. Now, did they remember to pick us up? That was the other question. But she always made sure somebody was going to pick us up if she couldn't. And, she was there. She was the PTA mom. Most of my friends in high school, they know my mother because she was very, very involved. She was involved all the way through. She was a room mother in elementary school because
I tutored in elementary school.
Because of the fact that we were, like I said, at 5 years old, I started having issues with people calling me names. My mother made sure she was very active so that she could make sure that everything that was supposed to be happening was happening at school. And she was also, she helped with the Girl Scouts too. She went on a camping trip with me because of my asthma and because I had to have medication on the trip. I had to have somebody go with me. And so my mom went with me, and my mother, when she went with me, my father had just had brain surgery, but she couldn't get anyone else to go. And she wanted to make sure that I had that experience. And so I really do thank her for that, because most mothers would have probably said, well, Renee, looks like you can't go camping this year. Your dad just had brain surgery. But my grandmother was at the house taking care of my dad. And so my mom went for the weekend.
Well, your dad is the one you need to thank, because he said, go on, don't stay, go with Renee.
Oh, I didn't know that. Because I didn't feel like he was quite in his right mind. That was a rough time. That was rough. Very rough. We have another question. It's obvious from today's session that you and your mother have an excellent relationship. It's really admirable and inspiring for mothers who want to have the same type of relationship with their child. What is the advice you give as a daughter, and what is the advice she can give as a mother that are keys to such success? That would be from your other daughter, Salam. So first, Mom, explain. Oh, you were organized. So that's how she juggled it, Teresa. She was very organized, which, Teresa, I know you are too. So I'm sure your kids will be just as happy as we are. But for me, as my mom, because my mom, I think I've always talked to my mom. My whole growing up, I talked to my mom. Me and my father butted heads when I was a teenager. But now I literally do talk to that man every single day. And if I miss a day, he's worried that something happened. So, but me and my mom, we were always cool. I mean, right, Mom?
Yes.
Yeah. So what would your advice be to Salam?
Stay in touch with the children, talk to them about what's going on in their lives, and be a part of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll talk, the three of us will get on three-way, and we talk, probably like once or twice a week. And then now that we don't live in the same states, my mother and father, they visit every year. They visit both of us. They visit my sister one time, and then they visit me at a different time. And then, we just make it work. What is the best piece of advice you ever received, Mom?
I think I got my best advice from church, from scripture, from listening to sermons. I think that was probably the best for me.
And what do you think is the best thing you ever heard? Like, do you have a scripture?
Coming from a very poor family with 7 children, my dream was to be able to be able to afford to live and to make enough money to live comfortably. And I worked hard at it.
And she did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And my grandmother and grandfather, they saw her do it. So yeah.
From my father and from my mother and my sisters and brothers and uncles. Again, it takes a village to raise a child.
Right.
I remember my Uncle Richard helping me with papers because he had a set of encyclopedias. And I remember my sister Diane typing up big project that I had for undergraduate work along with her girlfriend Shirley. That was before computers, and they did a lot of typing for me. Judy helped with the wedding organizing and planning while I was at U of M. Gloria drove me back and forth to school. So it takes a village, and I had the village behind me.
That is so true. And I mean, we grew up with a village as well. We had, and actually I would like to say that my mother she has several daughters because all my friends spent enough time with my mom that she was just, she might as well have been their mother too. She was always the house that, we always came over there, or we always went to my grandmother's house. So it was somebody in my family we were always congregating at. And 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 then the fact that I always drove. So that seemed to be the meeting place was my house. So, but Mom, my mother has watched every episode of the Ask Dr. Renee show. And for that, I thank her and my father for making sure that they see this craziness that we have going on here. And I appreciate them for supporting me in my endeavor, because this is no easy task. And I so appreciate my mom coming on the show today, because this was out of her box, but she was kind enough to do this for me. And I so appreciate it, because I think this was a great finale to my Mother's Day week, especially with it being Mother's Day. And on top of the fact that I didn't make it home for Mother's Day and my car didn't show up on time. So hopefully this makes up in some way. But I will find my way home soon. I'm sure of it. But Mom, so can you finish the sentences? The world needs
relationships, love.
I believe in
God.
Love is
a relationship.
And my job is
to preach the gospel.
And my mother is an associate rector at Christ Church, Cranbrook, and Bloomfield Hills. If anybody would like to go and see her preach, she is very good. And then the church has quite embraced her, to the point that I know that, even though we're not home, I know she has a lot of people at the church that care for and look out for her. So it's great that she has such a great church family, once again, because the church we grew up in was pretty awesome too. And then, Mom, you just recently received an award from all your work in diversity and helping to not integrate the schools, because they should have been integrated a long time ago, but to help to educate people. And what was that award you won?
I was selected as the diversity champion for Christ Church Cranbrook. And so it was the Birmingham Community House that was honoring all of the diversity champions. And so they asked me to do the invocation at the brunch where we were being honored.
So my mother has, she's had to go to bat. Most of the time I grew up and I was the only Black in class. And so that's why, this diversity thing is a very big, huge thing in our family, because a lot of times I was the only Black, and, you know, people didn't understand, and they said strange things that they probably did not mean to hurt my feelings, but they did. And so my mother was always right there. Same thing with my sister. She was always right there. And so she helped to start a lot of programs within our schools so that they understood why we're not coming to school on Martin Luther King Day, even though the school is not closed. And then, like I said, we had perfect attendance because we did miss Martin Luther King Day, but it didn't count against us because they knew that we should have had it off anyway. So, but thank you everyone for tuning in this evening. Thank you, Mom, for doing this for me. I so appreciate you. And I want to close out by just saying, thank you, Mom. You are the best. I wouldn't be me if it wasn't for you, because I've watched you and I figured out, okay. And I mean, obviously, you see, we have a lot of similarities. I'm the Girl Scout leader, and I'm always volunteering. And I know that we get that from our lovely Trudy, who's no longer with us. But she, my grandmother was really big into that. And so then, you know, my mother passed it on down, and my mother's very active in the church. No, I will not become a priest, but I am active in my church as well. I read every Sunday, and I'm on the vestry. And so I saw all these things that you did and was like, okay, well, I want to do that too. And so if I can be half of the mother that you've been, then I know that I've done a good job. So for now, I'm just trying to be the best Auntie Nene I can be to my little buddies. And one day I'll have children, and hopefully I can be a great mom like you, and they'll be just as tight with me as we are to you. So happy Mother's Day.
Thank you, Renee. I love you.
I love you too. And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, and all the grandmothers and the aunts and the godmothers and the sisters. Thank you everyone for watching. Next week, we will have an announcement because I haven't got the confirmation that we have the person yet, but I will definitely let you know. But on May 24th, we have Royale Watkins. He was part of Def Comedy Jam. He's a TV writer. He was the writer for Everybody Hates Chris. Are We There Yet? He's produced all of the Centric All-Star Comedy specials, and he's hilarious. So you'll love him. And actually, if you'd like to get a preview of him, his podcast is free. You can download it. Royale Watkins, Sorta Kinda Funny is the name of the podcast, and it's a hoot and a holler because he's a hoot and a holler. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Good night.
Good night.